You know, it's funny. One of the more common criticisms of Justin Fields, and this goes back to his time in Chicago, is that he will make one read, not like what he sees, tuck the ball and run. Criticism. I actually don't have a problem with that at all. I'd like to see more of it. Good afternoon to you. Good Friday afternoon. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is the new Double Shot Show. It comes your way every weekday around this time. I don't know that Fields is going to be the starting quarterback, but it's what we have to go on right now. You know, Mike Tomlin put up all kinds of signals and hints and suggestions, but you have no idea how that's actually going to play out. However, there is some merit to having someone who is, I don't want to say uniquely capable, but close to uniquely capable, since Lamar Jackson also exists, of being able to pick up yards for you in a way that defensive coordinators hate to scheme against. For the same reason that for the longest time they hated when Lamar Jackson and the Ravens came to town, because it was like, oh, that guy. All right, let's get the alternate playbook out. And let's see what we can do about stopping this guy. And more often than not, they couldn't. They haven't been able to. The Steelers had some success, but John Harbaugh had one heck of a counterpunch in these playoffs. If you have that guy, if you have someone who is, I'm talking about just from a physical standpoint, physically capable of running at a Lamar level, and Justin absolutely is that. If you have someone who is physically capable of throwing the football, I'm talking about strength and, yes, accuracy. I don't think it was appreciated, the accuracy with which Fields, especially in his first 4 out of the 6 starts, was just pinpointing passes. And he did it, by the way, all through training camp and the preseason and everything else. So it's not like it was an accident. And then you graft on top of that your greatest fear about Justin was supposed to be either his turnovers or that he wasn't that he wasn't making things happen with reads. Okay, turnovers. Yes, there were fumble problems. There was the CQ exchange repeatedly with Zach Frazier, which I'm now more convinced than ever were on Justin and not on Frazier, because Frazier didn't have those issues with Russell Wilson, right? Okay. But when you're talking about Fields' turnovers, the main worry coming from the Bears were the picks. He had 161 passing attempts this season. 161. 1 interception. 1. Now, there were only 5 touchdowns, which is a number that he would very much need to get up. And in fact, you could argue that that was the one statistic upon which Mike Tomlin based switching quarterbacks when he did, although I'm convinced he was going to do that no matter what. He was just going to find something. But that's a very real improvement in a very real area. Whatever you think of, for example, Wilson's ability to read the field versus Fields' ability to do the same, Fields had a 65.8 completion percentage. Wilson was at 63.7. Whatever you think of how they matched up, Fields ended up with a 93.3 rating. Wilson ended up with a 95.6. Russ got sacked 33 times. That, to me, is the one. If I was Tomlin and I was looking for a statistic to circle, that's the one. Russ got sacked 33 times for 219 yards and losses. Wouldn't let go of the football. Wouldn't let go of the football. And where Justin is concerned, if all he does is make the one read, and by the way, he's capable of more, and there's plenty of film evidence to that effect, and his teammates will back him on that whenever I talk to them. It's like, no, you don't. I mean, I was his second or third read here. They'll be able to share with me after a game. He also ran for 289 yards. And remember, that's in 6 starts. So that means he's basically a 500-yard guy. You can put 500 rushing yards into your bank. If I go back over Fields' career with the Bears, that was the one thing you could count on in Chicago more than any other, was that he was going to get you stuff on the ground because people just can't catch him. They can't catch him. In addition to being really fast, he's also really strong, really tough. So he doesn't necessarily put himself in harm's way. This is someone who's 6'3", 227 and thick as a brick. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with the Steelers going at opponents with a rushing offense that includes a rushing quarterback. That's what I'm saying. When we come back, I'm going to be joined by Chris Halleck to take a look at the Wilson side of things.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Joined now, as promised, by Chris Halleck. Chris, Russell Wilson got off to such a wonderful start against such not wonderful opponents. And I mean, we said that at the time, though. This wasn't something that we pulled out of nowhere and thought. And I feel now, in hindsight, rightly so, that was part of Mike Tomlin's timing, was that he wanted Russ to be able to jump in against lesser opponents. And he did. They had the two New Jersey teams, and they couldn't stop anything or anybody. And Russ got comfortable. Russ was reading the field, got confident, and things went really well for a little while, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, first 7 weeks, they go 6-1. They become a 10-3 football team. Everything was, I mean, it wasn't just the fact that they were winning games. It was the way the offense was looking. It was the way the offense was scoring points. More than 30 points in multiple games. The one game against Cincinnati in Cincinnati. I think over 500 yards of offense. Russ threw for more than 400 yards by himself. Everything was going great. He really, obviously the big thing was he really helped them unlock the explosive plays down the field. By those patented moon balls of his, hitting George Pickens or occasionally Calvin Austin, or I think even one time Van Jefferson, and then obviously the one to Mike Williams in Washington. So
one that was it. and then things went south, and then all that he was left with those moon balls, and you saw it. I don't think it started really in Philadelphia. I know that's the easy line of demarcation because that's when the losing streak started and that's when the plunge started, and then it turned into a collapse. I think it started with the work that Coach Schwartz was doing up in Cleveland against them. You could see that the Browns had figured out some stuff, and the Browns were flushing Russ out of the pocket, and that specifically didn't go well, partly because the offensive line is not any good. Certainly wasn't any good at that time. And Russ just couldn't resist holding on to the football. Now, this is not new for Russ. This is the Russ that's always been. He held the ball in Seattle. He held the ball in Denver. And he was going to hold the ball in Pittsburgh. The difference is, two differences. One, the line here was worse. And two, he's 36, and he couldn't get out. He couldn't get away from anybody, and he never stopped thinking that he could.
Well, and so here's the problem. I would compare young Russell Wilson to a young Ben Roethlisberger in some ways. They both loved to get outside the pocket. They both had the ability to make some dynamic throws outside the pocket. But whenever you play that type of a game, that really is a young man's game. Because you're younger, you're athletic, you still have your speed, you don't feel as worn down even when you take some hits. But as you get older, it hurts a little bit more to get out of bed, right? It hurts a little bit more whenever you take those hits. It hurts a little bit more over the course of those years. The difference is Ben Roethlisberger was 6'5" and 240 pounds.
And could take it.
He could
Yeah.
take it, but also he could stand in the pocket and see over his offensive line and start break things down. And as he got older, he morphed his game into becoming more of a pocket passer. And
Well, they morphed his game. Let's be clear. That can't Art Rooney and Todd Haley morphed his game, but they did it to good effect. Yes.
Right. And so, but that's the point, is that he, regardless of how it happened, he became more of a pocket passer and became even more productive. But he had to do that not only for his health's sake, but also just for efficiency's sake, because as you get older, you get slower. I wish I could still run the way I used to whenever I was 27, but I'm 37 now. I can't run that way anymore. Russell Wilson, he has no other way of playing. He can't morph into a pocket passer because he's 5'11". You just can't morph into a pocket passer.
So if you're watching this show right now and you're listening to us and it sounds, hey, yeah, these guys really know what they're talking about, whatever. And you're thinking to yourself, hang on a second. When the offense was going well and when Russ was going well and there were reliable sources informing us that the Steelers were hoping to commit to Russ long term, how did they, meaning the Steelers, not foresee this? How did they think that he was just going to continue exhibiting some sort of 20-year-old's level of athleticism when that's just not actually practical? I mean, he was going to get banged up and he was not going to get rid of that football.
I think they hoped that in Arthur Smith's system that he would be a good fit for that he would be a good fit for the play action. And Russ has always been a good play action passer. So he would be good at a play action. He'd be good at stretching the defense down the field. And he was good at those things.
I was going to say both of those things. Yeah.
Right. But the problem is that, and it was really epitomized in the playoff game loss to the Ravens, is that there's no intermediate game. There's just none. He didn't make one pass attempt between 10 and 19 yards. It was all either under 10 yards or more than 20 yards downfield. Not one pass attempt in that intermediate range.
So there's no bailout. There's no escape. There's not even a. We got on the wide receivers and the tight ends at different points in the season. Like, why don't they come back to the ball? Why don't they come back to the ball? Well, they don't. That I think is a scheme failing. That was on Smith, but they don't. So Russ would run out of the pocket and he'd look upfield. He'd see the same thing you and I would see, which is four guys like 20 yards downfield, all on the sidelines, nobody in the middle. What was he supposed to? He would have no choice but to chuck it into the stands. The whole thing just felt like, whether it was Cleveland or Philadelphia or whatever, this became oil and water. Something between the Smith scheme and what Russ wanted to do became oil and water, and Russ wasn't about to change. And maybe that's what's changed in this dynamic, was they all went, whoa, hang on a second. Because if that looks like that now, imagine what that'll look like a year from now, or through a full 17 games. And remember, Russ didn't play that. Russ got started a third of the way in and still looked like that at the end.
Yeah, for me, the biggest issue, I don't think, was any kind of issues between Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson.
I think personally, no. I've been in there. Those guys are talking to each other. No personal issues.
Right. And so, but I think the main problem more than anything is that defenses started to figure out how to defend Russell Wilson at this age. They figured out, okay, this offense really only gets going whenever Russ is throwing the deep ball. And so the Ravens in that first half of that playoff loss to, down in Baltimore, I mean, they took that away, and then they pretty much made Russ just settle for everything either at the line of scrimmage or within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. You can't move anywhere. That's why they had 59 yards of offense at halftime. But, after they get a 21-0 lead, yeah, they can afford to be a little bit more, lackadaisical and everything like that. And then the Steelers, things just happen to open up for them. But it's too little too late at that point. You have to be able to hit defenses in a number of different ways. I think Arthur Smith's capable of doing that. He did that with Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. He didn't really have a good quarterback in Atlanta, so it's kind of hard to pin that on Arthur Smith at that point. But I don't know. I think that's the part where there was a falling out between Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson in terms of actual on-field play.
Yeah, football only. Yeah.
Right. Is that there's just nothing in the intermediate. It was
I'm going to stress this. There wasn't a falling out. It wasn't a matter of a disagreement.
No.
It's oil and water. The system, the scheme doesn't work to address what Russ's shortcomings were, and Russ's shortcomings don't fit with, Look, in one way or another, it sure doesn't sound like he'll be back. We, on the other hand, will be back with a J1Q.
Safety is a habit. Gun safety and responsible storage are no different. Help prevent gun accidents, misuse, and theft. Keep firearms safe and secure when not in use. For safe storage options, visit projectchildsafe.org.
Time now for today's J1Q, and for that, we head down to that place that hosts the Masters.
What's going on, DK? This is DeMond Brown, Augusta, Georgia. And I'm curious, we say Tomlin is the de facto defensive coordinator. Has he been getting in Terrell Austin's way? You know, you give Chris and those guys an assignment, something to cover, and they go do it, and their name's on it. You know, I would assume you're not sitting over their shoulder writing articles for them, you know, and then, you know, claiming them to be the writer. You know, are we doing the same thing with Terrell Austin as the defensive coordinator, with Mike Tomlin over his shoulder, you know, doing the defensive coordinator work, but just calling Terrell Austin the D coordinator? If you get what I'm saying. All right. Peace.
I do get what you're saying. I'm one of those people who has repeatedly referred to Tomlin as the de facto defensive coordinator. But when I say it, Demond, I mean it. I don't mean that he's looking over the coordinator's shoulder implies that the coordinator is doing the work, and then Tomlin comes in at the end and says, no, that's not any good. Every head coach does that. Okay, that's actually the head coach's job. You want your head coach doing that. You want your head coach to look over the game plan and make sure that it fits with what it is that he wants to do. This is true of any sport, not just football. You want the person who's in charge to be in charge. However, there's a difference between that and what I mean, anyway, when I say de facto defensive coordinator. Tomlin is just the DC, period. What Terrell Austin is in this environment is he's the guy who's doing, I guess you could call it, the dirty work. And I don't mean that because he ends up taking the blame. I mean, although that's actually probably not a picnic either, especially, you know, under dire circumstances like we've seen over the past few weeks. I mean that from the standpoint that it's, you know, the hardcore film stuff. Get this information to me, but in much smaller packages, so it doesn't take me 3 hours to go through it. I can go through it in 20 minutes. Do you follow me? All football staffs have this. And at the NFL level, they've got assistants to their assistants, and almost all of that is exactly what I'm describing. It's get all of this film down to its most vital elements and show me that so that I can work with that. Tomlin makes the calls defensively. Now, he's not sitting there literally in the booth saying, I'm going to dial up a blitz or whatever. What he is going to do is he's going to determine in advance, listen, we're just not blitzing today. And you saw that a lot this season, by the way. This is the way we're going to approach this team. This is the way we're going to attack this. Now, from there, Austin is in the booth, and Austin is, you know, he's making the calls in the moment. But if the calls aren't working, it's not Austin that decides, hey, we're going to switch this stuff up. And that just doesn't, Demont, this is the stuff that kills you. Okay, because if you've seen the film, and I can understand why anybody would not want to watch it, of the Steelers playoff game in Baltimore, and you see what the Ravens had handed to them at the line of scrimmage in terms of nickel and dime packages while the Ravens are out there with their bigs. It's amazing they didn't rush for more than 300 yards. They could have had as many yards as they wanted, and the Steelers didn't switch this up until late in the third quarter. It took that long for the de facto defensive coordinator to make a move. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. In the year 2025, we're still having a conversation about a head coach overseeing a facet of football the same way everybody was 100 years ago when Chuck Noll wouldn't let go of the special teams. And finally, they talked him into hiring a special teams coach. He's like, why? I mean, I can do this myself. Well, he couldn't. And the Steelers began getting picked apart on special teams late in his tenure. The game's just too specialized right now. It's too intricate. I appreciate you, DeMond. I appreciate everybody checking out Double Shot. We'll be back with another one of these on Monday.